My name is John and this is VRF Viewpoint. So for today's episode, I wanted to put together a list of tips for new VRF techs. So I knew a technician, talented, young, very bright, very much felt the need to prove himself, did not want to get stuck on what he would consider basic equipment, very much determined to prove himself. And so upon his insistence, he was thrown, feet first into the deep end of VRF. He was given several accounts, and he's actually done quite well with it. But the pointers I'm going to go over today are maybe advice that would have helped him when he first started, or that would have helped me when I first started, or that maybe will help you when you first start. And if you're in the industry already, if you're working on VRF, servicing it, troubleshooting it, I've got a message for you later on, so hang on as well. So the first piece of advice that I've got for you is if you're working on these consistently, more than once or twice a month, you need to get trained. Get with your manufacturer, find out what courses they offer, tell them what you're working on, tell them what you're doing with the systems, and get the training that you need. It's like when you go to a friend's house to play a board game or a card game, and that 5 minutes, oh, you've never played this before, let's go over the rules. That training is like going over the rules. This is what the manufacturer is going to expect. You're going to fix our system, you should do it like this. You should bring it up to this standard. If it's like this, we won't warranty that. That's, you guys messed up. You need to know the ground rules going into this. And then along with that, whatever method the manufacturer has for interfacing with the system, buy it. It's probably expensive, probably more expensive than you'd think. Get your company to buy it, or buy it for yourself if you're in business for yourself. Spend the money, invest the time, get the training, get the software, get the interface, the maintenance tool or the service checker or whatever it's called. Okay? If you don't have these two things, you are going to be starting off the game 10 points behind. And every service call you go to, you're going to struggle because there's information you need that's going to be in that training, and that's going to only be accessible through that interface that you aren't going to be able to access. And then to compound it, when the customer or other technicians see you working on a piece of VRF with gauges and temperature clamps instead of a computer, they're going to be like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. Got to get yourself on the right foot, bite the bullet, get the interface, go to the training. That's tip number one. Tip number two, right now, commit to best practices. Now, if you don't know what best practices are, start reading. Manufacturer's going to have information about what they expect. So what do I mean when I say best practices? These are the things that more or less no one's going to see or know about but you know about them. These are things like flowing nitrogen while you braze. It can be difficult to figure out which port to flow into, to flow nitrogen, or you flow too much and then the braze joint pops. It can be difficult to get a huge system with 2,000 feet of piping to pull down under 500 microns to truly get a deep vacuum. It can be difficult to seal your insulation. It can be difficult to have plumb level piping. It's going to be behind a wall. No one will see it. No, it matters. Right now, right this second, decide I am only going to use proper industry standard practices working on this. Because the minute somebody sees that you repaired this, instead of running hard pipe for a thing, for a repair, you ran a piece of, you ripped out hard copper and put in like a line set. They're going to be like, what's that all about? Okay, this is a chance to prove yourself. This is an opportunity to do it right. And you may think that you're going to save the customer money. You may think that you may save your company money. Don't do it. As in, I'll get into this more in a later tip, but you're not saving anyone any money. you need to decide right now, proper practices. Cut your pipes square, not with a Sawzall, cut them with a tubing cutter. Sand the pipe, deburr the pipe, flow nitrogen, clean brace joints, pressure test, know there's no leaks, deep vacuum, protect the piping, no debris. These systems are extremely sensitive to debris, moisture, oxygen, non-condensables. They will be wrecked if they aren't installed properly. And as a service technician, you're one of the only people after that 1 year honeymoon period is over who's going to have the ability to correct some of these issues. And so you may go to a system and say, okay, it's low on charge, it's middle of the winter, I think I can add some gas and get it running right, but you're never really going to know how much refrigerant is in it. And sometimes you still have to just top it off and call it good, but if you have the time and the opportunity, pull the charge, weigh it, calculate it by the manufacturer's means if you had to, and then weigh it back in. It's the only way to know that it's right. So dedicate yourself to those proper industry best standards, best practices. That's piece of advice number 2. And you may feel like it's going to make you slow, and it will make you slower than you could be, but it doesn't matter. Tip number 3, take a deep breath, slow down. Nothing about VRF goes fast. This is not a rooftop unit. It's not a split. This is its own type of technology. If I troubleshoot a system and I decide that valve is bad, it needs to be changed, it's at least, under the best of conditions, at least half a day to pull the refrigerant out of the system. I may be 2 days into a repair. And if the system has contamination or has leaks or has other problems, it may be a whole day to vacuum the thing down. Okay, take a deep breath, slow down. You don't want to rush your diagnosis. You don't want to cut corners on your repairs. Because if you can get this system, deep vacuum, no contaminants, proper charge, and all the valves and everything work, they don't break a lot. But the people that cut corners will be back on that system again because the compressor failed or a valve stopped up or it's having other issues. It almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You don't have time to fix it right today, so you're going to have to come back and fix it right another day. Deep breath, slow down. There are repairs that I've made where I've logged the system for a day or a weekend. And then I will go, after I've had a chance to look at the logs, and then I can diagnose it because I have data to work with. If I put my computer on it and I have 10 snapshots, and it did it for 2 of those snapshots or did the weird behavior, that's not enough information. I've even been told by my manufacturer rep, don't even come to them with logs unless it's an hour worth of logs after the system's up and running where it's doing the weird thing that I'm trying to figure out. Okay? This is not the type of thing you want to rush, and for some people that's very hard, but you need to slow down. Take it slow, because once you find your feet, you'll go faster. But first, you learn how to do it right, then the speed will come later. Okay, so 4th tip, know who to call. You are going to come upon a system that is doing something really wonky. I have. Even recently. It gets less and less, but there are things I come up to and I'm like, I have no idea. I don't even know where to start. It's not behaving like it should. There was a system that went into defrost and never came back out. And we reset it and it would clear it and run, but then it would go into defrost and would come back out. It was the weirdest thing. Didn't even know where to start. You need to know who to call. Find that person, that mentor, that senior tech, that field rep, that person that knows these systems better than you, that knows them in and out. Get their phone number, be their friend, chew their ear off, just talk to them. Get that information for yourself. And when you get stuck, that's the person you want to call. And they might not give you the answer. They may have never seen it themselves. But they might bounce ideas off you, and they might ask you if you've checked things. And have as many of those things checked as you can. I mean, now's not the time to be like, oh, I didn't check the error log. Oh, I didn't run it through that test mode, or, you know, I don't know where those things are. I don't have that information. Have that information when you call. Do the legwork yourself, but have someone in your back pocket to call. If you don't have that person, get out there. I mean, start networking. Figure out where the technicians that know this technology are, and start learning from them. Find your network, because you'll need it, because you will get in over your head. There will be situations where it's going to be more than you can take on. So, 5th piece of advice, don't guess. It's very tempting. There's a saying that when you don't know exactly what the issue is, it could be a couple different things. Load the parts can and just change all the parts. Well, there's too many parts. There are dozens of valves, strainers, check valves. There's 2 thermistors, sensors, boards. I mean, there's 8 boards in some of these. You can't change all the boards. It's like $5,000 worth of equipment. You've got to slow down and diagnose. And then once you've diagnosed, go look at the manual. How do they say to diagnose? Oh, I can ohm this out. It should be between this and this. Oh, I can put it through this test. Oh, I can check this. I can disconnect this, and it should do this. Take the time, diagnose, be very thorough, and don't just start throwing parts at a system. It's like the person that diagnoses a bad compressor. Oh, this compressor has bad valves. Replaces the compressor, it still is the same thing because the 3-phase was reversed and it was going backwards. And then they feel sheepish because, you know, it was a 5-minute change 2 wires kind of repair. I've run into situations like that where I could have been in a rush of judgment, where the one that comes to mind was line sets were swapped. And so I could have said, well, it says the valve's open, nothing's flowing, so I'm going to change the valve. Well, not so fast. I need to check other things. But why is that one in cooling mode but the coil is hot? There were 2 that were swapped. And when they both were running in the same mode, it was fine. When neither was running, it was fine. But when they were running in opposite modes, or one was on and one was off, there were issues. And it took some time to troubleshoot. And eventually the solution was to change the port assignments. But I could have very easily thrown days worth of labor, dozens of parts at the thing, and not had the solution. Slow down, don't guess, verify before you go in and, you know, you condemn something. So another good example would be compressors. They can read ohms to ground if they're full of liquid refrigerant. And so if you've got one that looks grounded, put a torch on it for a minute, warm it up, get it up to temp so that, you know, the shell's warm, you know, there's just gas inside, and then retake your measurements. Those little things like that. These are not systems you want to guess with. And it's not that the parts are necessarily super expensive. It's that anytime you're dealing with the refrigerant side especially, again, like I mentioned earlier, it's going to be sometimes half a day to a full day just to recover the gas out of the system. So you don't want to just willy-nilly say this needs to be changed. 6th piece of advice, read the manual. Wherever your manufacturer has the literature, and for my manufacturer, the systems that I work on are Mitsubishi. They have a wonderful website, mylinkdrive.com. All the manuals are there, plus helpful videos, diagrams, parts illustrations, exploded versions, troubleshooting guides. They have engineering notes. They have tech tips and app notes. I mean, there's literature upon literature upon literature. Find that literature for what you're working on. Love it. Print it off. I know it's a 600-page manual. Print it off. Have it. Put it next to the toilet. Read it. Go through it. Highlight. So that's interesting. I didn't know that. I want to go back and look more at that later. It's tempting to just learn the parts that you know or that you work on and say, well, I don't do install. I don't need to learn the controls. You may. You may need to learn the controls, because what happens when the controls stop working? Oh, well, I don't do the piping. I just fix the boards outside. Well, what happens if the piping's messed up and that's what took the system down? You need to know all those things and know more than just the parts that you've been required to work on. You need to become curious about these systems and start asking yourself questions. Why does it work that way? How does that work? Get into the literature, get into the manuals, and you may actually get those at the training. Back to that first tip. and just start to become an expert on it. Now, at the beginning of this, I said I had a piece of advice for the techs that are in the industry, that are already working on VRF. Here is my piece of advice for you. If you've done all these things, become that person that someone else can call. Because you know how to take a deep breath, slow them down and say, okay, let's check some stuff. Okay, what you're seeing is that's covered in this part of the manual because you've read the manual. And they mentioned this in the training because you've been to the training. I know you don't have a service checker, you can borrow mine for a minute. Or send me the logs and I can look at them on my software. Become that mentor to someone else. Be that helping hand to someone that needs that help. We need techs to help each other in this industry because it is so complicated. And you know, sometimes you can wait on hold for technical support for a day and sometimes you can't. And I know I've got people from multiple companies and from multiple states that have my number. And I've gotten calls out of the middle of the blue and you know, I share what I can. So become that person for someone else. Now, there is a steep learning curve for VRF. And that learning curve is quite unforgiving and you're going to get frustrated as you move into this. How will you know you're getting over that learning curve? Very simply, just dedicate yourself. Every time there's a call, don't rush it, you don't guess, you dig in, you read, and you get the right answer, and then you fix it and move on. As you do this, eventually, you're gonna start coming back to the same problems. It's not gonna be a new problem. You're like, oh, I ran into this before. It was this last time, let me check that. Oh, it's the same thing. It's the same sensor, or it's the same valve, or it's a leak, and I know the symptoms, or whatever. You'll know what to do. And the number of times that you have to really buckle down and read through the 600-page manual become less and less. And that's how you'll know that you're really getting into this. And as that happens, the calls are going to get less challenging, and then you can handle more of them. And then you can help other people with them. And you've moved past that learning curve, and now you're into the industry, and you're not a beginner anymore. So it does get better, but don't give up. And don't get desperate, and don't cut corners, and don't make those knee-jerk reactions. The customers will be cold or they'll be hot, and they're like, when's it going to be fixed? And you're like, my vacuum, I'm at 1200 microns, it has to pull down. There's moisture in the system. Don't be rushed. Get it fixed right the first time, and then you don't have to go back again later. Those are my 6 tips, guys. If you had a new person that you wanted to leave some advice for, what advice would you give them? Leave your piece of advice, your 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th tip down in the comments for all the new guys that are watching this that, you know, instead of 6 tips, we might have 10 or 15 or 20. So if there's content you'd like to see, let me know in the comments below as well. Like, subscribe, share it with somebody that's getting into this, that needs to see this. And until next time, guys, my name is John, and this is VRF Viewpoint.